In this video, we're going to tell you all about the origins of Marvel Comics Galactus. In the beginning, in order to fully comprehend the true origins of the creature who would one day be known as Galactus, we first have to understand the roots of the Marvel Universe itself. Or perhaps it's better to say that we're looking for a quote-unquote Omniverse here, not unlike DC Comics' approach to its fictional universe. That said, the Marvel Universe started as well a universe. That is to say that there was one and only cosmos out there prior to the birth of the Marvel Universe as we know it today. This primordial universe had a name too, the First Firmament. Now you can think of the First Firmament as pretty much the embodiment of the entire universe itself. It's the end-all be-all entity right at the beginning of everything. And no, it wasn't just some floating mass that encompassed everything. It was everything. For all intents and purposes, you could also consider the First Firmament itself as the first cosmos. There was nothing before it. What's more is that the First Firmament was a sentient entity, well aware of its own existence in the otherwise empty vacuum of nothingness. Eventually, it got bored of being alone, which prompted it to create life within itself. This came in the form of two races, the Aspirants and the Celestials. Each of these races shared power and potential rivaling that of the First Firmament itself. As such, they had the ability to craft life on their own too. Now, one of these two races followed in the footsteps of their creator, as they too created life just the way that the First Firmament did with them. These are the Aspirants. In fact, that was the name that the First Firmament itself gave them after it saw how they attempted to emulate it. Then there were the Celestials. To put it simply, the Celestial race was sort of the black sheep of the First Firmament's family. Sure, they created life on their own too, but when it came to how exactly universes should work, well, let's just say that the Celestials had a different opinion from both their counterparts and their creator. You see, the Celestials were a more freewheeling race. They wanted their own creations to have an opportunity to evolve on their own, and for the universe itself to become dynamic, allowing itself to grow. And while that was something that the First Firmament was not having, to the entity at the beginning of it all, what the Celestials wanted was an insult to everything. It was madness, chaos. Naturally, the Aspirants sided with the First Firmament on this one, and eventually, a cosmic conflict that would one day be known as the Celestial War would be fought by the two sides. The Celestial War was bad times all over. Given the near identical natures of the participants, it was not surprising that both the Celestials and the pro-First Firmament Aspirants eventually found themselves at a stalemate. However, the Aspirants brew up something that they believed would turn the tides of war, a weapon called the God Killer Armor, which is exactly as advertised. It was a weapon specifically designed to take out beings like them. In other words, it was a game changer for the First Firmament side of the conflict. For a time, the God Killer Armor worked marvelously as it eliminated scores upon scores of the Celestials, but you can always trust infighting to ruin any war effort. You see, the Aspirants themselves weren't on the same page with one another. One faction wanted to use the God Killer to end the bitter war, while the other believed a much more conservative approach was called for. This faction wanted this God Killer Armor to be decommissioned and instead scrap it for parts in order to form a massive space fleet for the Aspirant army. As you'd expect, this caused friction within the Aspirant ranks, which effectively ate at their war effort from the inside out. In turn, the Celestials were able to muster their remaining resources and mount a counter-offensive against their enemy. Long story short, the Celestials made the most out of this opportunity and ended up routing the Aspirant army. They did this by setting off literal cosmic explosives from within the First Firmament, which then shattered the entity. From there, the First Firmament's fragments each gave birth to new universes, which then ultimately formed the first Marvel Universe, also known as the Second Cosmos. Now, the Celestials weren't exactly able to eradicate what remained on both the First Firmament and the Aspirants. What remained of their ranks retreated to a place called the Far Shore. Think of this as the primordial chaos that existed even prior to the First Firmament itself. Basically, it's the vast nothingness outside of the multiverse, a place where not even the Celestials could reach them. Birth, death, rebirth, repeat. Now, with nothing and no one to oppose them, the Celestials pretty much had their way with this new multiverse that they created. In line with their original desire to create and oversee a universe that continually evolved and grew, the Celestials made it so that each universe they created each had their own certain expiry dates, with each succeeding universe or multiverse supposedly better than the one that preceded it. And if you're wondering how many times the Marvel U had gone through this process, all you need to know is that the superhero-filled Marvel U that we know and love today is actually the 8th iteration of the multiverse, also known as the 8th cosmos. As for the 6 other universes that came before, you can find them in the same realm of nothingness that the First Firmament and Aspirants went to after their defeat, the Far Shore. The Devourer of Worlds. Contrary to what most of the superheroes of Earth 616 might think, the title Devourer of Worlds isn't just some name meant to strike fear into the hearts of whoever's encountering him. In fact, you'd be wrong if you simply thought that this particular creature was just some hungry cosmic threat from space who appears out of nowhere when they get the munchies. The truth is that the Devourer of Worlds is more similar to a natural occurrence. That is to say, it's part of the Celestials' own multiversal cycle in order for their creation and everything within it to continue evolving towards perfection. Simply put, each and every iteration of the Marvel Universe has or had its own Devourer of Worlds. It's a natural part of existence in the Marvel U, and one that's super necessary in order to keep the gears of the cosmos running. That said, Galactus is in no way the first of its kind, and it's usually the case that a Devourer of Worlds is one of the universe in the last remaining survivor of the cosmos that preceded it. Regardless of which cosmos we're looking at, the purpose and methods by which the Devourer of Worlds does its job remains more or less the same. A Devourer of Worlds simply siphons off the energy from any given world until it becomes a husk. As a matter of fact, Galactus himself uses a device called an elemental converter to do this most of the time in order to make the process as clean and efficient as possible. Galactus might be a planet eater, but he's not a savage. And again, this is super necessary in order to keep the cosmic gears turning for the Marvel U. Now, nearly everything we know about the Devourer of Worlds comes from none other than Galactus himself, since he's the planet eater that's been featured the most throughout Marvel Comics history. For one, it's because of Galactus that we know that each Devourer of Worlds also has a herald accompanying them, such as Silver Surfer or Nova. A herald's job is to scout for potential meals for the devourer they serve. In turn, heralds are given a fraction of the devourer's energies known as the power cosmic. For another, we know that Galactus' job is one of the most thankless tasks in all of the Marvel Universe. Can you imagine almost always coming across as that guy who's out to destroy everything and everyone you love? Well, that's Galactus, and he has to deal with that from time and time again. Speaking of, if a Devourer of Worlds does its job properly, then you're looking at feasting on a planet once a month on average, or more if our boy has to tussle with other cosmic threats lurking around. And sure, you might think it'd be cool to be a godlike creature roaming the stars possessing near unimaginable power, but you might reconsider this when you find out that Galactus' position as Devourer of Worlds is pretty much a double-edged sword. That's because, like any living thing out there, Galactus gains energy and power to stay in the game by converting his meals into energy. The problem is that the more powerful he becomes, the hungrier he gets. So why exactly does each iteration of the Marvel Universe need a Devourer of Worlds? The Devourer serves to maintain the balance of the universe it inhabits. You know, the same logic that Thanos used in Avengers Infinity War, limited resources and everything. However, the reality of it is it's a little bit more complex and far more important to the continued existence of the Marvel U. You see, a Devourer of Worlds like Galactus doesn't just digest the energies he absorbs from his meals. Instead, these planet eaters actually take in all the collective feelings, cultures, and more importantly, the will to live of the inhabitants of the planets they eat. Devourers are designed so that they work similar to an explosive. Instead of packing itself with gunpowder or uranium, creatures like Galactus fill itself with combined memories and feelings of the life that they've consumed. Eventually, a Devourer of Worlds would reach a point where it has to release its payload, and what an explosion that is. You see, these planet eaters reach the tipping point whenever it's time for the current Marvel Universe to expire, after which they detonate themselves. This then allows all the stored emotions, memories, cultures, and will to live inside them to scatter, which in turn plants the seeds for life for the next universe. The Celestials designed it in this way specifically in order to allow for each succeeding iteration of the Marvel U to become better than the last one, with their ultimate goal to create a quote-unquote perfect universe once all is said and done. That's because to the Celestials, the ends justify the means. A few 100 billion lives is nothing compared to having a perfect cosmos. He's not from here. We come to the point where we find out where in the world Galactus actually came from, and simply put, he's not from here. As we mentioned earlier, the Marvel U as we know it is set in the multiverse called the 8th cosmos. Naturally, you'd think that Galactus comes from the 7th, as per the rule that states any given universe's Devourer of Worlds is the last survivor of the universe that came before it. But our hungry guy is one special one, because he comes a little farther before that. Specifically, Galactus was born in the Marvel Universe's 6th cosmos. Now, we won't get into too much how exactly he was able to skip a universe and allow himself to continue existing, but all you need to know is that the origin of Galactus is far from the fearsome planet eater that he would one day become. You see, before he was the giant purple and blue devourer that we know and love, Galactus was just a boy from a planet called Ta named Galan. His mother was named Taya, who happened to be their planet's chief scientist, aka Ta's Science Supreme. On top of that, Galan wasn't conceived the old-fashioned way. Instead, he was pretty much a test tube baby that Taya herself created using her big brain and mastery in the field of genetics. So it's no surprise to find out that she wasn't exactly Mother of the Year. Instead of rearing her child, you can say that Galan was treated as more of an experiment, as she opted to spend her time doing science stuff instead of bringing up her genetically engineered son. Surprisingly enough, the young Galan ended up meeting the guy who would one day become one of his heralds, Norrin Radd, aka the Silver Surfer. There's an entire story in there that involves time travel, so we won't get into too much of it here, but what we will tell you, however, is that the Silver Surfer pretty much became Galan's nanny for a time during this excursion in the 6th cosmos. Sometime later, the 6th cosmos would reach its intended date of expiry as per the rules of the Celestials' Marvel Universe. It all started with the arrival of the cosmic entity known as the Black Winter. Now, the Black Winter's functions and responsibilities are basically similar to that of the Devourer of Worlds, except it's got a far wider jurisdiction. Simply put, if Galactus devours worlds, then you could say that the Black Winter devours entire universes. Of course, this is all part of the process, as the Black Winter is needed in order to kickstart the birth of the succeeding cosmos. In any case, the Black Winter's arrival caused the rapid decline and deterioration of the 6th cosmos. By this point, Galan was a grown man working as a spacefarer on Ta. Now, it didn't take long for the Black Winter to do a number on the 6th cosmos, so much so that it became where Ta was one of the last inhabited planets who managed to survive the Black Winter's ongoing onslaught. Make no mistake though, Ta was nearly dead at this point, with their population decimated and their remaining resources only a fraction of what it once was. As such, Galan was tasked with traveling through the farthest reaches of the 6th cosmos in order to find a way to prevent Ta's utter destruction. But Galan was not entirely on board with this idea. You see, he was the only guy at the time who was willing to accept the truth that their days are numbered, and it's only a matter of time before the Black Winter comes for them all. In turn, Galan proposed an alternative to end their lives in a blaze of glory by flying their spaceship right into the heart of the cosmic egg, which is basically the place where the absolute end of the 6th cosmos would happen, and the birth of the 7th cosmos would begin. His fellow Tayans realized that Galan was right, it was the only choice they had. So Galan and the remaining survivors of his home planet hopped on one of their ships and made a beeline for the cosmic egg. This resulted in cosmic rays bombarding their spacecraft, which took out each and every one of Galan's fellow Tayans. Curiously though, Galan found himself not only alive, but he suddenly felt a surge of newfound energy coursing through his body. Before you learn what happens next, you should know that each and every iteration of the Marvel Universe is sentient, similar to the First Firmament itself. And right after Galan felt that surge of energy in him, he came face to face with the 6th cosmos itself. Or to put it simply, Galan met with the personification of the 6th cosmos during this fateful meeting. Galan would then learn that the energy coursing through his veins came from the 6th cosmos itself, as it fused itself with him in order to give birth to an entity who had the ability to live well beyond the confines of time itself. And so, Galan ceased to exist, and the one and only Galactus, Devourer of Worlds, was born. On a side note, we learned that the Black Winter had planned for this, as it specifically left Galion alone in hopes that he would be reborn as Galactus, after which the Black Winter planned on hiring him as its own herald. In any case, Galion, now going by the name Galactus, survived the end of his native universe and was given a second lease on life in Marvel U's next iteration, the 7th Cosmos. The Devourer of Worlds. Now, as in with all previous iterations of the Marvel U, there was a stretch of time where there was nothing at all right after the death of the previous Cosmos. But as these things go, a big bang eventually occurred, which became the 7th Cosmos. We also find out that the 7th Cosmos personification was split into two entities, namely Infinity and Eternity. Not long after the birth of the 7th Cosmos came the awakening of Galactus. But don't get it wrong, our favorite planet eater didn't exactly come out of the gates running. That's because Galactus was still in the middle of his transformation into the Devourer of Worlds during this period. At this time, Galactus was just drifting across the vastness of space as he continued to morph into his rightful role. Along the way, a member of the race known as the Watchers named EC spotted Galactus and managed to get a hold of him. EC then studied Galactus, which allowed him to sense the unimaginable power running through his body. More concerning to him was the fact that he knew Galactus would one day become a creature of near endless hunger who would be responsible for the end of countless worlds. He thought of taking out Galactus right then and there, knowing what fate the universe would encounter when he becomes fully transformed into a planet eater. But in the end, he decided to follow the Watcher's #1 rule: do not interfere with the goings-on of the universe at large, and well, just watch. And it was a good call to make too, as he and the rest of the Watchers would eventually discover just how integral a Devourer of Worlds is to following the natural order of the Marvel U. It was during this era when Galactus decided to use his abilities to give his fallen brothers and sisters from Ta a proper funeral. He did this by putting them into space pods meant to fly across the cosmos for eternity, staying true to his spacefaring traditions. After that, he would craft his trademark purple and blue armor, not just to protect himself from outside threats, but to serve as a regulator for the cosmic energies surging within his body. Then he created the vessel known as Lifebringer 1, which served as his personal incubator. For millennia, the budding Devourer of Worlds drifted across the 7th Cosmos as he came ever closer to becoming a fully realized planet eater. Eventually, Lifebringer 1 crash-landed on Ego, the living planet, and again he'd come across his once and future herald, the Silver Surfer, during one of his time-hopping adventures. And during this encounter, Ego the living planet would help the Silver Surfer against the god of symbiotes Null. In return, Norrin Radd would do Ego a solid by taking Lifebringer 1 off of its surface. Before leaving though, the Silver Surfer contemplated on whether he should take out Galactus before he fully transformed into a complete Devourer of Worlds, but he ultimately refrained from that after a bit of convincing from Uatu the Watcher. He told him just how important Galactus' role is to the cosmic order of things. Instead, the Silver Surfer simply confronted the budding Galactus inside Lifebringer 1, and after a bit of a heart-to-heart, he would send the incubator hurtling towards a planet called Archaeopia, where Galactus would spend the rest of his metamorphoses. Galactus' transformation couldn't come at a better time, as he reawakened as a fully fledged Devourer of Worlds just as a crew of Marauders was about to attack Lifebringer 1, and let's just say it was all business from here on out. Galactus wiped out the entire fleet of Marauders without even breaking a cosmic sweat. And then when the Devourer of Worlds realized his cosmic tummy was having the grumblies, Galactus set his sights right on the planet and promptly feasted on it. Galactus would then spend a few thousand years doing this to other planets rich with life and energy. Along the way, he'd also build his very own space bachelor pad, which he dubbed Ta 2. Like we said, Galactus might be a planet eater, but he's far from being a simple-minded savage. You see, Ta 2 wasn't just his home among the stars. He built it as both a tribute to his home planet and to Archaeopia, the planet that broke his world-devouring cherry. You should also know that Galactus made it a point to stick to consuming energy-rich, uninhabited planets for some time. As a matter of fact, he spent hundreds of years following this plan. But as with most things, uninhabited planets rich in life force were limited, so it eventually came to the point where Galactus was forced to chow down on planets with sentient life on them. And simply put, Galactus did fill his belly this way when he ran out of other alternatives, but he didn't enjoy it. Just to prove Galactus isn't necessarily a bad egg, he was well aware of his role in the natural order of things, and whether it's a crisis of conscience or sincerity, the Devourer of Worlds knew that he would one day make up for all the lives he had taken once the end of the 7th cosmos finally arrived. Galactus hires a Herald. As per the laws of the Marvel Universe, a Devourer of Worlds usually has a Herald to help them look for the best planets to consume. Galactus is no exception, and our guy had a number of Heralds throughout the course of his existence. His first ever Herald was a creature known only as the Fallen One, and believe us when we say that this guy was a real piece of work. That's because the Fallen One immediately decided to go off on his own and disobey Galactus's orders the moment the Planet Eater trickled down some power cosmic on him. Of course, Galactus easily did away with the Fallen One after realizing he was a bad hire and put the dude in space prison. The Fallen One managed to eventually escape captivity after he spent the rest of his days trying to step up to his old boss. Sometime later, Galactus would meet arguably his longest tenured herald to date, Norrin Radd, the Silver Surfer. It all started when Galactus came across Norrin's home planet, Zen-La, and unsurprisingly, the Planet Eater didn't arrive at Zen-La's doorstep for tea and crumpets. The planet itself was on the menu. So in order to save his homeworld, Norrin approached Galactus and the two cut a deal with each other that the Planet Eater would refrain from eating Norrin's home planet in exchange for serving as his herald. For a time, the Silver Surfer performed well in his duties as Galactus's herald. However, their relationship eventually soured when Galactus came across Earth and wanted to put it on the menu. Norrin was having none of this, so Galactus ended up firing him. But not to worry, Galactus failed to consume Earth when the Fantastic Four used the Ultimate Nullifier. Now, Galactus and Silver Surfer's got a long on and off again relationship with each other that we won't go into too much detail here, but simply put, Silver Surfer and the Devourer of Worlds relationship stands as one of comics' most iconic partnerships. And that is saying something too, because Galactus has gotten around over the years. All in all, the Planet Eater has had nearly 20 heralds over the course of Marvel Comics history. These heralds weren't C-listers either, as the list continues the likes of Nova, the Fantastic Four's Human Torch, and even the Asgardian god of thunder, Thor. But in spite of all of this, his ride or die remains to be the one and only Silver Surfer.